Hello, and welcome to Mr. Doomerang, and today I will be reviewing the remaining 30 plus some cards that I'm yet to review, and then afterwards I will be giving my overall review of the set. So starting off, we have Forge of Souls, a warrior card for 2 mana, draw 2, which means this is already insane unless it has an insane drawback, and it doesn't. It just draws 2 weapons from your deck. So my first instinct was to compare this to things like Arcane Intellect and Arcanologist. Mage has the basic standard for drawing 2 cards, with Arcane Intellect. And Arcanologist has been busted ever since it's released. So instead of getting a 2-3 body, you instead draw an extra card. You're already going to run weapons in your deck. Control warriors already want to be consistent with their weapons, such as they always want Fire Warlocks on turn 2, and there will be some cases in Control Warrior where you coin Forge of Souls in order to get that, and you don't even need to play it in order to get Fire Warlocks. You are going to get Blood Razor with this, because you will run this in every single Control Warrior deck alongside Blood Razor. Now, Forge of Souls will most likely not see a 2 of. Snow Fury Giant is an 11 mana 8/8, so now you have something to evolve a 10 mana card into finally. And it costs 1 less for each mana crystal you've overloaded this game. So this is comparable to Arcane Giant. However, Arcane Giant is easier to trigger because you have to cast a spell instead of casting specifically overload cards. However, this card can see play in that basically big easy Shaman, right? Because you already want to run your Earth Elementals, you run your Lightning Storms, probably Volcanoes, and right there is probably enough to make your Snow Fury Giant cost 0. And if you add anything on top of that, well, you're doing pretty good. The only issue I see with this card is it doesn't have Taunt, so generally when you're playing big easy Shaman, you have to rely on your taunts staying alive. And if your taunts don't stay alive, you're dead. Playing an 8/8 without taunt would mean you're dead. Especially with the removal of Healing Wave. You don't have that much burst healing. You more have granular 6 healing at a time, 3 healing at a time. And then you also stay alive with your taunts. This doesn't have that. Though, I will say if the meta is super control, getting these Snow Fury Giants out on top of your Earth Elementals and probably playing a Lich King and a bunch of other controlling cards could make a big, easy Shaman. Probably not tier 1, because it'll just get countered by Hex, Polymorph, stuff like that, but possibly tier 2 or 3. Night Howler, this card doesn't even need an explanation. This is obviously terrible. Even if it triggers twice, it's still terrible. Triggering 3 times, and it's practically dead. Hildnir Frostrider, it's a 3 mana 4/4. If there were a vanilla 3 mana 4/4, it probably wouldn't see play. So this battle cry has to be basically irrelevant to the card. But battle cry freezes your other minions. So if that's the case, it can only see play in Shaman, because I just said that 3 mana 4/4 is not good enough to see in Constructed. However, if that one card, Murabi, is seeing play, possibly refilling your hand with your own minions that you already played, with Hildnir Frostrider, could be good. I don't see it working out, though. It's too slow, too situational for not that much of an upside on stats. Avalanche is directly comparable to something like Meteor, kind of. It is a Shaman card other than a Mage card. However, it does basically affect 3 minions at once. In the case of token decks, such as Token Druid, they want to play stuff like Bittertide, and if you freeze your Bittertide and then deal 3 damage to the adjacent ones, that's probably the best you can do on 4 mana, aside from just hexing the Bittertide. And in some case, it'll be even better to play Avalanche than hexing the Bittertide, because not only do you freeze it so you stop the 8 damage immediately, but you also kill the adjacent minions. In the case that you want to play Avalanche, you'd probably just want to run Lightning Storm or Volcano instead. However, if there were a freeze deck, you always want to freeze the highest priority minion, and that as benefits with stuff like Murabi, and your Ice Pick, and this also comes directly after your Ice Pick, so that's pretty good. Arthas is apparently Arthas' dog, which people did not know we had. Me for one, because I've never played the old games. However, it's a 4-mana 2/2, which means that this better have an insane effect. And you can think of this Death Rattle as adding a random dream card to your hand, in some cases better than a dream card. So it's okay in some classes. I'll show you the Death Knight cards right now. So if you're playing mid-range, some of these will be good, some of these won't. However, if you're playing control, the majority of these would be pretty good. Some of them stalling fatigue, such as Death Grip. Anti-Magic Shell, if you're playing Priest and you play that card, you will probably win the game. Death and Decay being basically a 6-mana card for 3 mana. This is all pretty good, so it could warrant it. There is another card that gives you Death Knight cards, but given that Arthas comes down 4 turns earlier, it can actually justify having these low stats. In some cases, it might only be good if you have a way of triggering this Death Rattle multiple times, but even if it triggers once and you get the right card that you need, it could be actually pretty good. Now, Furnacefire Colossus is already a 6-mana 6/6, so it's pretty okay stats. 5/5s are actually significantly worse nowadays, but 6/6s are pretty good at killing those. This discards all the weapons from your hand and gains their stats. So if you discard a Fiery War Axe, you get a 6-mana 9/8, which is okay. Because this is kind of like discard, but without RNG. Because one, you're discarding a card that you basically already know, and 2, you're discarding cards that may not matter as much. If you discard a Doomhammer, this is an 8/14, which is actually insane. It'll just die to hard removal if this is the center of your deck, however. And it's also worth mentioning that you are losing value, because you'd probably rather just play Doomhammer instead. Overall, this card does have potential, but I'm not sure if it will actually see play, because the decks that you want to play this in want to do other things. Such as you won't want to play this in Pirate Warrior, you won't want to play this in Control Warrior. Paladin wants to just play Spike Ridge Steed on 6. And Shaman probably doesn't want to play Doomhammer, and if it does, it's going to play it the Smorq. So this card doesn't really fit in any of those archetypes. The Lich King is the other card that gives you Death Knight cards. It is insane. So if you look at this, it is an Iron Bark Protector for neutrals, so that's a thing. But that's not a sizable comparison to what this card does. You can think of this card as a Ysera, because it has the exact same amount of stats as Ysera, given that probably this having 12 health and 4 attack would be better than 8/8. In some cases, sometimes you just want to end the game faster. And the Death Knight cards could actually be as good or better than the Dream cards. Not to mention that, unlike Ysera, where you play on turn 9, 1 turn later, and it doesn't have taunt, you'll die if you're up against an aggro. This thing actually has an immediate impact with taunt. Everybody else that actually sees this card gives it the exact same rating. I am the one that's going to as well give it to you. This card's actually really good. It's probably going to be an auto include in a lot of control decks. I most likely will craft this card if I don't open it. Death Revenant is a 5-mana 3/3 that is too hard to trigger the effect to be any sizable amount of stats. Again, as I mentioned previously, a 5/5 is not very good. However, if you've got a 6/6, it would be pretty okay. But you need to have 3 damage minions on your side to do that, and that's just way too hard. Scourge Lord Garrosh is an 8-mana card that equips a 4/3 that also damages adjacent minions. So if you think of this as always attacking the adjacent minions with your attack, you could think of this as a 12/3 weapon. And that is insane for board control. Not only that, but that's basically the only good side of this hero. The downside probably being this hero power. So you remove your armor up ability for an ability to deal 1 damage to all minions. So this hero power is a whirlwind for 2. But stuff like the Warlock hero power being insane, that I'll show soon, and like the Paladin hero power being pretty okay on its own, this hero power needs to hit a lot of stuff, and needs to have a lot of synergy on your own side to actually see play. I'm not sure if that'll work out. There's stuff like Rot Face that this works with. I'm pretty sure you just rather have your regular hero power, though this also combos with stuff like Sleep the Fishes. It is possible this will see play in just standard Control Warrior. But whether Control Warrior is better than Taunt Warrior is the real question. Grimscale Knight is a 1-mana 1/1 Murloc with lifesteal. For some reason, the majority of people believe this card's bad, which is correct. However, there's a small amount of people that believe this card is like a sleeper OP card of the set, and I'm here to tell you why that is not the case. For one, it's a 1-mana 1/1, so I believe there's already a 1-mana 1/1 Murloc that gives +1 attack to all other Murlocs, which when you're playing an aggro deck, which when you're playing Murlocs, that is the case, is significantly better than gaining a small amount of life. Because also, when you're playing an aggro deck, life doesn't matter. So this card is obviously bad because Grimscale Oracle, I believe is the name of the card, does not also see play. Drain Soul is a pretty interesting card from Warlocks. It's actually really powerful. Warlocks always ran Dark Bomb when they had the ability to. And a lot of the time, because there's a lot of 3/2s in the meta, dealing 2 damage to the minion is all you need. And gaining that extra bit of life is really good as well. And so this is just a solid card. If there's going to be a Control Warlock, you'll probably automatically add 2 of these into your deck. Drakari Enchanter is a card that is spurring a lot of people to think combo decks will arise, or thinking because he triggers some end of turn effect twice, it is OP. I'm here to tell you that is not the case. It is very hard to find a amount of board where this will be good, because trigger on only 1 minion is not good enough, especially when a lot of end of turn effects are just not that insane. I don't think this is the power level we need for an end of turn effect card. Arrogant Crusader is a Paladin 4-drop, has the exact same amount of stats as Piloted Shredder, 4/3 and a 5/2, and its Death Rattle is kind of the similar effect, or the average outcome of Piloted Shredder. However, it has to die on your opponent's turn, though if you're playing an aggro deck, that would always be the case, because it has 5 attack and 2 health, so unless they play a taunt, you're never going to trade. You always want to deal 5 damage to face. And if they do play a taunt, they're just giving you 5 damage, just do whatever to, which is okay. This is probably a really good card in aggro Paladin. It's just whether it'll move the other 4 drops aside. I mean, they don't run Consecration in the deck. They only really run True Silver. So Arrogant Crusader could actually see a realistic amount of play in aggro Paladin. Dark Conviction is a 2-mana spell that sets a minion's attack to 3 and 3. So this is another spell for, the Quest Paladin decks that'll never work out. However, in an aggro Paladin deck, getting this 2 turns earlier than that one other 4-mana 3/4 Paladin card that did the same thing did. And they always ran that card because you can buff your 1/1s up to 3/3s. However, without that 3/4 body, and you wanting to already probably play a bunch of other 2-drops, I don't see this seeing a realistic amount of play. However, it is also worth mentioning it could be used as a hard removal. However, you already have other set minions that 3 attack and 3 health, such as Sunkeeper Turin. Bloodworm is the neutral form of what a generic lifesteal thing will be. It's a 4/4 that is okay. It could gain you 8 life or more. But it's just a vanilla minion. It's not really going to see that much play at all. It's not going to see play. Blood Reaver Gul'dan is a 10-mana card. It's a hero, so this is the Warlock hero. and summons all friendly demons that died this game. So this is immediately comparable to N'Zoth, which you already play a sizable amount of demons in Warlock. So that's pretty good. This if you bring back 2 demons, 2 6/6 demons, that is pretty good given your hero power that I'll get to in a second. However, you also play a 5-mana 4/5 demon that I'll get to soon, and I'm also going to compare this to Cruel. Cruel being a card that you have to run in a Reno deck, and also you have to build up your hand and then drop it all at once with Cruel. This card just generating its value out of nowhere, not making you drop your hand, which is insane difference for a 1 mana. The only difference between this card and Cruel is that you don't get a 7/9 immediately with it. However, you get all the other demons you played this game, and you basically draw cards for every other card that you didn't have to sit in your hand and play with Cruel. And then also there's this hero power. Hero power is 2 mana, deal 3 damage, lifesteal, which is absolutely insane. So if you compare this to that other card, the 2 mana, deal 2 damage, lifesteal that I already reviewed, this is probably a mana or 2 mana better than it. And if you compare this to the Druid hero, which a lot of people compare as a really good hero, this is better than if you got both parts of your hero power in one. The only issue being is you want to run Jaraxxus in Control Warlock when there's other control stuff, because you just generate a 6/6 every turn. And you probably don't want to run Blood Reaver Gul'dan in the same deck. So that's an issue. But if you already don't want to play a Jaraxxus, and maybe you have some good demons already in your deck, this hero power will basically just spiral out of control nearly as much as Jaraxxus is. Strong Shell Scavenger is a 4 mana 2/3, so this could be comparable to Defender of Argus. However, instead of giving minions taunt, you give your taunt minions +2/+2. You already have a bunch of 1/5 small taunts, and buffing them up could be okay. However, I believe this card is too slow to realistically see play, because I also believe that you only run the 1/5 taunts in a token deck, or you'll run that spreading madness, the spreading thing, the 5 mana druid spell. You'll run that, but I don't think playing that 5 mana spell is warranting you running the Scavenger. Tuskar Fisherman. So when I revealed the Spirit Lash from Priests, I said that card will be really insane if we got another 2 or 3 mana spell damage minion. This is one of those. However, it's not particularly the case because it gives another minion spell damage +1. Generally, when you want to combo stuff, you want to play a minion with spell damage and then immediately combo with it. This has to have a board first, but you gain that +1 health. But because you have to have a board first in order for you to get the spell damage, I don't believe this will see play, because you usually combo spells immediately after playing it. Bone Baron is pushing the Death Rattle rogue theme. Getting those 1/1 skeletons in your hand can be okay, but really you're looking at the 5 mana 5/5 body, and you're also looking at the fact that rogues don't really have, other than Vile Spline, a minion you want to play on 5 mana. This can be that, especially in Death Rattle decks. You now have a 5-drop Death Rattle that curves right into Ayachan. If a Death Rattle deck works out, this will most likely see play in it. I don't think this will work out in Miracle Rogue, because you want to further your game plan or play Vile Spline instead. However, this card is a very well-statted minion, though again, 5/5 stats are not as good as they seem. Doomerang, there is a lot of controversy about this card. It's 1 mana, you throw your weapon at a minion, it deals its damage, and then returns to your hand. So people have been saying that this card is kind of like deal 3 damage in the average outcome, and then draw a card. However, that is not the case, because you kind of draw half a card. Because if you have a 3/2 weapon, you attack with it, you now have a 3/1 weapon, and then you play Doomerang, you wasted the last charge of your weapon. So you get a 3/2 weapon back into your hand. However, you wasted a charge already, so it's kind of like you have half the value. And I don't even think Doomerang or weapons are going to see play in the first place. And given that Doomerang is not enough to carry a weapon class, and it only deals damage to a minion, I don't think weapons or Doomerang will ever even fathom seeing play. Vrygul is a minion directly comparable to Egg Napper, however, it is strictly worse when you compare it to that. It's a 3 mana 3/1, same stats as Egg Napper, however, its Death Rattle is if it's on your opponent's turn, so that's a downside. You summon a 2/2 ghoul. So there's two reasons that this is worse than Egg Napper. One being, when you're playing Egg Napper on a token deck, you want the 2/1/1s instead of a 2/2 because you want the more minions to buff. And also, it's at the end of your opponent's turn, if it's your opponent's turn. So if they have to trade into this 3/1, which you a lot of the time wanted to trade in with Egg Napper, trade up, and then you want to buff the minions that got spawned. Not only that, but Egg Napper is cycling out of a lot of token decks, and so Vrygul has no chance. Exploding Bloatbat is a very weird card. This is actually a consecration with a 2/1, but because it comes with a 2/1 first, it is very slow. That's basically it. It's Hunter, it's a slow consecration. You'd rather just run Explosive Trap for 2 mana, basically the same effect, but you don't get a 2/1, which is worse. This is bad. Maybe if you add this to something with your hero power as the Hunter Death Knight, which I don't think is a very good card. Alright. Wicked Skeleton is a 4 mana 1/1 that needs a lot of minions to die in order to be good. A lot of the time you have to trade down in order to get this effect to be any sizable effect. And it's just not very realistic. So, bad. Scalemancer is a card that either people say is trash, or people like Crip say is actually insane. So if this effect triggers, you get a 5 mana 10/10, which is very sizable. And the 8/8 skeleton is actually really big and hard to deal with. It is comparable to Twilight Summoner, kind of, because you get a 4 mana 1/1 and a 5/5, and this is actually favorably compared to that. You just need a little bit of synergy with Scalemancer. So there are two things you could do with Scalemancer. You can give it taunt, or you could play it when you think your opponent wants the board clear, and then they can never board clear. And even if you give the Scalemancer taunt, that could stop your opponent, even if they're playing aggro, from wanting to go through your taunt minion, because it's a Scalemancer that'll summon an 8/8 minion, and then they'll die. It's just whether or not the meta is too fast to play 5 mana 2/2 with insane combo potential. It depends. I think this could see play in Paladin. Other than that, I don't think it'll see play. But in Paladin, it curves right into Spike-Ridged Steed, and that will add so much, so many problems for your opponent to deal with. Archerous Veteran, I'd say, is a strictly better Abusive Sergeant. This is also comparative to the Argent Lanceman, or just the Lance Carrier, that's his name, but for 1 less mana. This has more aggressive stats than the Lanceman, the Lance Carrier, but you only get 1 attack permanently to a minion. So this is actually really good and better than you think it is. This will possibly make Zoo good again. I said that the other 1-drop that Warlock's got, the Sanguine Reveler, was insane because you have now 4 effects that you can trigger eggs with. Now you have 6. And you can also buff up your 1-attack minion, such as Possessed Villager. And if anything, this Battlecry dealing 2 or 3 damage, because it is reoccurring damage, is not that hard to come by. This is actually a very powerful 1-drop that could make just a bunch of aggro stuff good again. Aggro Paladin with Divine Shields could be good, because this will guarantee deal 2 damage, because if you put out a Divine Shield, it will attack once and then probably be attacked into at least, because it has Divine Shield. This card's really good. This is going to see a lot of play. Wretched Killer is a card that exists in Elder Scrolls Legends. It is a 1-mana 1/1 that whenever it attacks, which means it can't actually just attack through taunt, because it'll just directly deal damage whenever, not after it attacks. However, it is a better Leper Gnome, because the majority of the time you will trigger this at least once. It's just not good enough. Like, the Archer's Veteran is just so astronomically better than this. In 1/1 stats, as I said before, one attack is terrible, and this being 1/1 stats for being able to smork more is not warranting. Toxic Arrow is a 2-mana, deal 2 damage to 4 hunters. So this is this 1-mana extra on Arcane Shot that is never even fathomed seeing play. And if the minion you target with this survives, which means you want to cast this on your own high health minion, you give it poisonous. So basically this is a hard removal spell if you have a board that works with it, and you have an enemy minion that warrants you using 2 cards to try to kill, which is not very good because you're playing Hunter. This card's trash. So Nash is directly comparable to a card that is basically seen play in every single Druid, Feral Rage. Instead of being able to choose between 8 armor or 4 attack, you kind of get a little bit of both. You sacrifice 1 attack for 3 armor, which is a fair trade. However, when it comes to Feral Rage, you usually want one or the other. For example, there are a lot of 4 health minions that you really need to kill, such as Frothing Berserker, or you will die. Same goes for Gadgets and Auctioneer. I'd say the ability and the flexibility of being able to choose when you've stabilized to gain the armor, or the ability to deal 4 damage, which is much better than 3, is better in every single case. And also it's worth mentioning that Feral Rage has insane synergy with Fandral. If you compare this to Feral Rage and also to Bite, this card, I mean, Bite never saw play. This card probably won't see any play, and Feral Rage will just see play over it. Death Axe Punisher is a 4-mana 3/3 that gives a minion that wants to be buffed, but you probably won't be playing, +2/+2, and it's slow. This card is probably trash. I will say it's trash. Keening Banshee is a card that gains +1 stat for its effect of being able to remove top 3 cards of your deck every single time you play a card. So you can think of this as a Fel Reaver. However, that's not a fair comparison because Fel Reaver triggers whenever your opponent plays cards, so they can mill your entire deck. I still think this card is bad, because a 4-mana 5/5 will die to basically any other 4-drop while you discard cards at the same time. If this was a 5/6 or a 4/6 or 4/7, then we'd be talking, but these stats are not good enough to justify you discarding a lot of cards. And basically, even if it didn't discard cards, a vanilla 4-mana 5/5 probably wouldn't see play. Spectral Pillager has a very interesting damage effect, which means rogues are intrigued. However, because this costs 6 mana, and it costs 6 mana, so it just costs too much for the combo potential. And so, I mean, sure, there'll be meme decks of you being able to OTK your opponent with this, but realistically, you'll run other cards over it. Tainted Zealot is a card that I've been looking forward to. The other 2-drop spell damage minion was not good with Spirit Lash, because you also need to have a board for it to even remotely be good. Tainted Zealot has combos with a lot of spells. Not only Spirit Lash, which is insane, also Maelstrom Portal, which you'll probably just run Blood Mage instead in that deck. However, it also has combos with Defile. For example, if you play Tainted Zealot and you play Defile for 4 mana, so that's actually pretty good. If you kill a 2-health minion with the first trigger of the Defile, it'll trigger again for another 2 damage, so that's already 4, and then it will kill the Tainted Zealot, which means it'll trigger for 5 damage AoE. So in that case, it is better than Blood Mage Thanos. And possibly you run both. However, I'm not sure if you run 2 Tainted Zealot, Maybe you run one Blood Mage, one Tainted Zealot. But this card has a lot of potential, unlike the other spell damage cards. Venomancer is a vanilla minion with Poisonous. It has 2 health on top of the Emperor Cobra that never saw play, and it's not a beast, so this card will never see play. Spellweaver is 2 mana on top of that other Kobold card for the same effect. It's a 4/4, 6 mana, less combo potential. It'll never see play. Grim Necromancer is a very interesting card. 4 mana 2/4, and if you combine the Battle Cry effects together, it's a 4 mana 2/6. However, 1/1s aren't really equal to 2 stats because they're just dinky 1/1s. However, in a token deck, you'd rather have 3 minions than 2 with Mr. Bitey. So this card actually has potential to see play in token stuffs. It is also worth mentioning that this comes in right before Bloodlust, so if you don't have a 1 damage AoE, you're going to be taking a lot of face damage. Grave Shambler is a 4 mana 4/4 elemental. I'm not sure why it's an elemental, because the decks that you want to run this card in will not benefit from being an elemental, and it is too impossible to get this to trigger an amount of times that actually matter, so this card sucks. So in Druid, I believe that a control-y Druid that already exists could benefit from stuff such as Ultimate Infestation and Malfurion the Pestilent, as well as possibly Spreading Plague. The other cards are trying to push something that I do not believe will work. Hunter is getting a few cards such as Professor Putricide, Corpse Widow, and Bear Shark that are actually incredibly powerful. And though other people say Deathstalker Rexxar is an insanely powerful card with their hero power, I do not believe the hero power warrants the removal of your 2 damage hero power, because you also have to pay the combined mana cost of 2 beasts that you just created. And so that's just way too slow. If you compare this to Raxus, you just get an immediate 2 mana 6/6 every turn for 3 extra mana off the bat, which compares way much better than Deathstalker Rexxar. Mage is getting things that push 3 different archetypes. Whether or not they pushed enough is soon to be found out. Ghastly Conjurer is like the jack of all trades card. I believe you will see that more than any other mage card revealed. Cold Wraith, Syndragosa synergy for Tempo Mage, but other than that, not really much. Frostlich Jaina, if an elemental mage becomes this, it is okay. It's really good, actually. If an elemental mage comes, Frostlich Jaina will be the MVP of that deck. It's just whether or not an elemental mage is going to work. And currently, I'd say no. Paladin is getting a lot of high-statted, aggressive, as well as control minions. Arrogant Crusader and Bolvar will most likely go into every deck, as well as Righteous Protector in every aggro deck. And then Uther of the Ebon Blade just auto-include in every single control deck. The health gain and the ability to just win the game if they can't deal with your 2/2s is so insane. Priest is getting a few things that are off the wall, such as Shadow Essence. However, they are getting a lot of powerful cards, such as Embrace Darkness and Spirit Lash, as well as Eternal Servitude and Shadow Reaper Anduin. Shadow Reaper Anduin is so powerful that it could actually make a Reno Priest deck work on its own. Obsidian Statue may be too slow, but I will definitely be trying a deck with it in my N'Zoth Priest, as well as maybe in Dragon Priest Death Rattle stuff, because they got Bone Drake. Rogues have got some incredibly grindy / tempo cards of Plague Scientist, Runeforge Haunter, and Lillian Voss. However, they also got some weird off-the-wall cards such as Leeching Poison, Rule the Bones, Doomerang, Spectral Pillager. I hope a grinder rogue will work, but as we've always known from the past, they'll probably pick up something like Valyria the Hollow for an extra turn and like OTK potential, even though I think Valyria the Hollow is actually a really bad card. It is worth mentioning, though, that Mike Donay himself said Valyria the Hollow will go in every single rogue deck for 2 years, which makes me shudder, but I'm still going to say that card is terrible. Shaman is getting really strong cards such as Ice Fishing and possibly Burlock to go into the Murloc deck and possibly add that last minute finish for the quest. They are also getting some off the wall cards such as Drakari Defender, Cryostasis, and Murabi. I believe that the only cards that'll see play here is possibly Snow Fury Giant in a control deck and Ice Fishing in a Murloc deck. The others do not have any sort of direct deck they go in, unless Freeze works. Warlock cards are so bad that you're getting Unwilling Sacrifice to remove it from your own board and Treachery to give them to your opponent. However, they're getting insane cards such as Despicable Dreadlord and possibly Blood Reaver Gul'dan for control, and Defile and Drain Soul for control as well. Sanguine Reveler is possibly the best one drop in the entire game, and that could make Zoo come back on its own. Blood Razor is possibly the best card in the entire expansion. However, the other cards that seem to synergize with it, such as Valkyrie Soul Claimer and every other card that synergizes off of damage minions, do not seem to work. So Blood Razor is going into every single control deck, as well as possibly one Forge of Souls. Whether every other card here sees play is very questionable. The neutral legendaries are a lot of the princes, which seems like the only prince card that is good is Prince Valinar, and it is very niche to see play in that scenario. Lich King is possibly the best legendary ever printed, and possibly even the best card released out of the set. Arthas, you just get the same insane effect once, but earlier on, so higher impact the earlier on you get. The only neutral epic that will see a realistic amount of play is Corpse Taker because Paladins, and Skulking Geist because possibly Jade Druid would become super insane with the advent of a control meta. Whether or not a control meta even appears is questionable. So Corpse Taker is the only really good epic card you want, unlike the last expansion where there were a lot of epics you wanted. The rares are actually pretty good, such as Phantom Freebooter could actually just go into a Pirate Warrior to replace Naga Corsair for the tempo. Shallow Gravedigger, though people say it's terrible, and it could actually be terrible, could see play in Quest Priest. Bone Drake, I believe, is the most underrated card ever. This card, I believe, is insane. This card is actually insane. And Serenite Chain Gang also has some potential. But lol, ticking abomination. Bone Mare has been called the next Dr. Boom. It is very possible that is the case. However, it is 7 mana, so that tops out the possibility of aggro deck running it, such as Zoo. Though Zoo is a more mid-range kind of board control deck, so giving a minion +4/+4 is possibly okay. But then again, you just want 1s and 2s, so this accidentally drawing a 7-drop in a Zoo hand is not the best, so I don't think it'll work there. It could work in Paladin, but Paladin already has Spike Ridge Steed. I don't think Bone Mare is nearly as good as people think it to be, though it could, for a neutral minion that only is pure stats, it is better than the majority of the previous and possible future of what a 7-mana neutral high stat minion is. So I'm not gonna shove it out of there and say it's terrible, but it is not a deck-defining card. Cobalt Scalemain is pretty okay. I mean, in Dragon decks or even just filling that 5-drop slot, possibly this is better than the Bone Baron and Rogues for 5-drop slot because it just 8/5 if you have another board. Necrotic Geist, I don't seeing auto-include. However, if the meta is filled with a bunch of 2-damage AoE, such as Primordial Drake, Volcanic Potion, Consecration, this will counter that, as well as just being an okay minion to trade up and then get a full board of 2/2s. So though people, again, write this card off, I don't think it's nearly as bad as people think it is. Fallen Sun Cleric, I believe, falls down compared to other cards. Archer's Veteran could also possibly just be the best card in the set. It is a very, very strong 1-drop. And Grim Necromancer could also see a realistic amount of play. So overall, there are a lot more powerful cards and deck-defining cards than people may think. I am looking forward to playing this expansion and trying out all of the insane cards. I hope that control meta is here. However, given that Token Druid has only gotten cards that possibly work in them, I'm not sure. Though there is anti tokens now with like 1 damage AoEs and 1/5 taunts. Maybe we'll be in the control meta. But anyways, thank you for watching, and I hope you're just as hyped as I am. Goodbye.